covering!
Company of Heroes is a cutting-edge real-time strategy game, both in terms of its presentation quality and also in terms of its design. This is a game that it keeps you busy doing a variety of very different things as you focus on a really intense and very graphic frontline combat in this really just incredibly vivid portrayal of World War II. The game is very focused in its design, so don't expect a ton of different playable factions or a ton of different maps to play on or anything like that. But what the game does, it does exceedingly well. From a default perspective, the game kind of looks like your typical real-time strategy game. It's got your isometric perspective and all that. Where the detail starts to come in is when the bullets and the tank shells and things start flying. You see that the battlefield becomes scarred and basically gets demolished as you're fighting. So tank shells and things, artillery fire leaves craters, which your infantry can then use for cover. Buildings can get absolutely demolished, set on fire, and things like that. These things don't just look really, really impressive, they also have a profound impact on gameplay, since your infantry can hole out in a building just so long as it doesn't collapse over them and kill them all. These types of scenarios both illustrate how good Company of Heroes looks, but also how its graphics tie directly into the gameplay and basically make a lot of the experience much more intuitive. While we're at it, the audio in this game is incredible too. Tank shots, machine gun fire, it's just incredibly loud and will make you wince in pain practically as you're seeing your guys get blown up by this stuff. Meanwhile, the use of speech in the game is really good too.
Isn't this what engineers
There's some
are for?
surprisingly funny lines of dialogue, but moreover, your characters are constantly reporting in to you. You'll hear little details like how they whisper their orders at night, trying to keep a low profile, or how when you're hearing orders from off-screen, it sounds like they're coming in by radio. Stuff like that really pushes the audio further than what a lot of other real-time strategy games have done. And meanwhile, there's this great sounding musical score the whole time. It's your typical kind of military bombast type stuff, but it seamlessly blends in with the action and really sounds like it could have come out of a World War II movie like, say, something like Saving Private Ryan. Company of Heroes has a level of realism to it in the overall presentation that's really striking. Now, before we get too far ahead of ourselves here, let's go over what you get in the game. There's a substantial single-player campaign that's played entirely from the Allied perspective. There's a historic premise to the campaign, so you know how the story ends. However, there's some interesting use of cinematics, both using the game's 3D engine and also using kind of these animated paintings that help move the story along. So there are these little recurring threads and a few major characters that are introduced throughout the missions that then come into play and help tie everything together. The missions themselves are quite interesting and exciting and certainly don't involve just demolishing the enemy base. They're often about cutting off enemy resources or holding certain key points in a strategic location, liberating towns, things like that. So you're doing a wide variety of stuff. You're having to use both infantry and base defenses as well as armor. You're getting your hands dirty with a wide variety of different things, and a lot of your guys are dying throughout this campaign, and the missions could get really quite tough at the normal difficulty. So it's fortunate that there's an easy setting that you can switch to, and the difficulty settings go all the way on up to hard and expert, and even if you're very experienced at games like this, those are going to give you a real run for your money. Thankfully, the game has a very solid step-by-step tutorial to walk you through the basics of the gameplay, but there's still an awful lot you're going to need to learn. This game is so frantic that you're always going to feel like you could be a little faster and a little more efficient with how you're using your time. From a gameplay standpoint, Company of Heroes takes some cues from developer Relic's previous game, Warhammer 40,000: Dawn of War. Like that game, this game focuses on frontline combat, so don't get comfortable sitting in your base. You're really going to have to go out there, gather resources, and basically spread the battle across the entire map, not just in areas that are convenient for you. The game's resource model is a big part of what makes the gameplay so frenetic. There are 3 different resources you need to keep track of, which are manpower, munitions, and fuel. The maps in which the battles take place happen to be divided up into territories, each of which has a different resource node on it. So when you claim that resource, you also claim that territory, but watch out because your opponent can come in with his infantry and reclaim the territory from you. And he could even cut you off from other nearby resources if the direct line to your HQ is cut. So you're really having to think about the entire battlefield, not just the area between your base and the opponent's base. You do have to build up a base, but there aren't that many buildings and you don't spend a whole lot of time in your base. Instead, you're marshaling armies and you're sending out these infantry squads to claim resources, harass the enemy, support your vehicles. In addition to all the big picture strategy happening in any given fight in this game, there's also the smaller picture tactics going on when your forces engage with the enemy. So things get really interesting here too, because any given unit has a variety of special abilities at its disposal and is more or less effective in certain situations against certain types of opponents and so on. Tanks are almost invulnerable to infantry, so tanks are really a scary, terrible threat in this game, and yet infantry can use things like sticky explosives to take out tank treads, damage their engines, things of that nature. Snipers can take out individual members of infantry squads, tanks can attack one another's rear armor to cause way more damage than they would if they just shoot each other from the front. So you could spend all your time just micromanaging a given skirmish, but you can't do that because you have to go back to base and worry about the bigger picture as well. If you've enjoyed RTS games in the past, you're probably going to find that Company of Heroes does a lot of things a whole lot better, bringing a whole new level of realism and complexity to the battlefield. But if you're not squeamish about your real-time strategy games or about your depictions of World War II, you're going to find that Company of Heroes just does an awful lot really, really well, enough to make it stand out both as a World War II game and also as a real-time strategy game.
Super!